Hi, I'm going to share with you some of my favorite ways to use the YogaTribe blocks to help counterbalance what most of us sit in a lot of the time, which is that forward head position. Because our eyes tend to move towards whatever we're focusing on, and that pulls our skull with it. So when we're peering at our screens, our devices, often many of us develop short neck extensors and weak, deep neck flexors, and that pulls our shoulders forward as well, so we shorten in the chest wall, and it can feel quite uncomfortable and also really kind of dull our energy down. So I'm going to use the blocks first in a passive chest opener, and then I'll show some other ways to release around the back of the neck and also strengthen those deep neck flexors as well. So you can take one block for your head. I always like to start on the highest height because it's always easier to take it down lower after. And then one for the chest. Now I'm going to today take this acrossways because of the activation we're going to do afterwards, but you can also lay it lengthways, and that's really nice as well. So we'll bring that one across, and where I want this front edge of the block to rest is right around the bra strap or the bro strap area. So come to resting back, find that bra strap area. Now before I lay back, I want to lift up my pelvis and I want to scoop my tailbone under. Now what this does is your low back naturally rests in extension. That's its shape. So if we forget to do that, we just tend to extend more in the area where we're already extended, and we want to bring a little more focus of extension around the thoracic spine. So that's that whole part of your spine where the ribs attach. So then with that length, laying back, resting the head on the block, and what we want to make sure is that this head block is flat on the floor. You don't want it on an angle, and we want to have this length through the back of the neck. So we want to try to avoid the chin poking up. We want to have kind of the forehead a little higher than the chin, and then resting the arms out to the side with the shoulder blades snuggled in and under you. And it's best to keep the knees bent, especially if you tend to hyperextend in the low back a lot, and maybe just knock the knees in against each other so it's a nice neutral position. Closing down the eyes if that feels comfortable for you, or keeping the eyes open but just soft on one point. Make sure that the palms are facing upwards so that you're externally rotated in the shoulders. And really let the upper arms sink heavy. That will help to open across the chest wall and the front of the shoulders. Start to tune into your breath. Feeling the rise and the fall of the chest and the rib cage with each breath. And tuning into the more subtle qualities of your breath. The expansiveness of the inhalation. And the consolidation of the exhalation. Expanding the breath into that diaphragm level of the body, so around where the block is on the back. Wrapping right around that interior surface of the rib cage. Try to notice any contractions or anything that keeps you from enjoying full, nourishing breaths. Now, this is a great pose to take after maybe a long day at the desk. To release across the pectoral muscles, across the chest wall. And when we're lifted and open in the chest, and our energy and our mood is a lot more elevated. the physical posturing, the signs, the signals of somebody that is depressed or down. It's that sunken chest and rounded shoulders. So sometimes when we find it difficult to change our mood or our current state of operating, when we change the physiological structure of the body, and it has that flow-on effect to the emotional body, the mental body. So of course, if it is accessible to you, you can have that head block down a little lower to bring a little bit more vertical expansion. But only if that feels good. From wherever you are, we'll just take a few more rounds of breath. Softening anywhere that you can. And then we'll take one hand, cradle it underneath the back of your skull so that you lift the weight of your head. Slide that block out. And then we want to hold the skull. So interlock your fingers behind the back of the skull. Then we're going to use the block like a fulcrum to open over. So soften the chin down so that you're lengthening through the back of the neck. Cradling the skull in the hands. Now I've got the elbows out wide, which brings this more horizontal expansion, but if you've got any instability issues in your shoulders, you'll probably be better with the elbows wrapped in more to shoulder distance. And if you take that, you'll find you get a little bit more vertical length. If it's okay to play through the two, you might play through the two. And you can lift the head, the skull up, and then arch back over. You might do that a few times to mobilize those spinal segments, maybe moving up or down a little bit as you need to. And then we're going to come into lateral flexion, so a side bend. So bring the skull back up to about the level of the block, and then side bend over towards one side, bringing one elbow closer down towards that side of the waist, opening up the opposite side. So here we start to open through the little facet joints on the side of each vertebral body. It's quite often in these little joints that we get fixated, come back through center, and sometimes we even get those little pops, those little clicks when those joint spaces unfixate. And you might do that a few more times, side to side. Resting the skull heavy into the hands. And you can also explore here with a little bit of kind of rotating up and on an angle so that you start to kind of massage into some different points, figuring out where you need some release work. Or you might be a little more static. So getting on all these really interesting angles. And then in preparation to come up, we'll draw the chin in towards the chest. So you use a little bit of abdominal activation there. I always like to hold on to the edge of my mat, press the elbows down and try to come up as evenly as you can. So you might slide the feet away, pull on the mat, try to come up as evenly as you can. There's always a moment there where you're kind of like, am I going to make it? Yes, you will. So now I want to use the block, and I want to use this front edge of the block underneath the base of my skull. So if you take your thumbs to the back of your skull and move the thumbs downwards until you find that little hollow, that little shelf there, that's called the occipital hollow. And if you feel around there and apply some pressure, you'll probably find some little trigger points. Now what trigger points are localized pockets of tension or tenderness. So that's where we want to find and lay some weight into. So I'm going to come back Get your hair out of the way if you've got long hair. You could lay the legs out long or however you're most comfortable. And you want to situate yourself so that the base of the skull is kind of hooked on that block. Now, if you're newer to this, you might want to start on that lower height. And these blocks are relatively fat as well. So you might want to begin with that and take it up as you get a little bit more length through here. Now you want to relax the arms completely, because the key to this being successful is actually the act or the art of surrender. So you might feel a lot here first off, or you might not feel much at all. What we're going to do is start to very slowly turn the head towards the right until you meet one of those little trigger points, and it might just take a little bit to find that just right spot. And when you find one of those little trigger points, rest there heavy. I think of this area when we work and palpate around here, it's like a little off switch for the brain. You really feel that down regulating effect on the nervous system. By applying that pressure, we're stimulating the many receptor cells within the tissues to elicit this relaxation response. So whenever you feel that tension, that pressure start to dissipate, just move like a millimeter or so onto a slightly different angle. This is also one of my favorite remedies for if you find it difficult to sleep or to switch off from a busy day. This brings you down super quick. So we'll just work a little bit more on this side. And of course, you can always pause the video and stay a little longer if you're on something really good. And we'll roll the skull slowly back through the center. Pause heavy in the center. You might even notice a release down across the upper trapezius down to the shoulder. Now just know for the second side you might need to reposition your skull or the block a little. And then start to rotate towards the other side, feeling, finding, pausing on any of those little triggered points. Melting, dissolving what has accumulated up around here. And this area is intrinsically linked to our eyes through a really complex network. So quite often releasing around here, you feel a positive flow-on effect into the sinuses. And sometimes when I come back out of these poses, my vision is a little clearer, a little brighter. So long, smooth, sweeping breaths to help aid this process of release, of surrender, of letting go. I'll just work this last little bit around the side. You're not pushing into the block, you're not trying to make or force anything to happen. Just letting go, layer by layer. And we'll slowly roll back through to the center. Pause in center. There's a really specific way that we come off of this. So you want to scoop one hand underneath the back of your neck so that you can slide up and completely support the weight of your head. Slide that block out, just pop it to the side because we will still use it. And then both hands behind the skull, so you cradle the weight of the skull. And then as you slowly lower down, I'm pulling at the base of the skull, so I'm really lengthening, really tractioning out through the back of the neck, and I feel that all the way down through the spine. And then release, relax the arms back down by the side, and now just notice how your skull is resting, how the shoulders are resting, and the back of the pelvis. And then from here, I'll get you to re-bend your knees just so that there's a little bit more integration through your deep core. I want you to start to exhale and use that consolidating force of your exhale to gently tone this whole abdominal band. So imagine all of that fabric of the abdomen drawing inwards and downwards. You're nice and stable there. We'll take the block. I know this sounds a little bit weird, but bear with me. This is just giving you a lot more feedback. We're going to take the block onto the forehead. So notice if my chin is up, I'm going to notice that with the block. So we want the block so that the block is nice and flat, and that gives you the signal that the back of the neck is nice and long. Now we want to keep the block in this position, so there's an accountability for that here. So tune into your breath, and then I'm going to glide my skull straight up, and it's only going to probably lift a centimetre or so off the floor. You'll feel the deep neck flexors working, and then glide back down, and my chin softens down, so I stay long in the back of my neck. So this is reformatting these muscles around the neck. So here, glide straight up. My low ribs are integrating, the deep core is on, and then glide back down. And so this is helping to mobilize those spinal segments that often get stuck in that extended position. So again, glide up, straight up. It's only a small movement. Try not to let the chin jut. And then glide back, so you can think a little kind of double chin action there. We'll do that again. Glide up. Keep the jaw relaxed. Glide back. One last one. Glide. And back. And that's a really good exercise. We'll take the block out, we'll pop it down. You can do that seated as well. If you don't have a block handy, say you're in the office, you can use your fist as that feedback as well. You might like to lie out in a little bit of relaxation after that work. And thank you for joining me on the mat. Namaste.